What transforms an ordinary man into a figure capable of shaping the destiny of nations? Is it merely the combination of ambition, intelligence, and historical circumstances, or does something darker come into play? In the history of humanity, power often seems to follow inexplicable paths, guiding certain individuals to positions unreachable by conventional means. What if, behind one of the most impressive trajectories in recent history, there were hidden secrets? Secrets that connect political decisions, historical events, and forces that transcend the material world. Did Vladimir Putin rise to the top solely through the strength of his will, or is there an invisible pact guiding his every move? Leningrad in the post-war era was a place of brutal contrasts. The scars left by the Nazi siege were still fresh, and the fight for survival was a daily struggle. It was in this hostile environment that Vladimir Putin was born in 1952. Growing up in a place marked by pain and deprivation profoundly shaped his personality. From an early age, he learned that the world offers nothing for free. Putin's childhood was marked by humility. He lived in a small communal apartment, typical of the Soviet era, shared with several families. In this suffocating atmosphere, where privacy was a non-existent luxury, he developed his ability to observe, listen, and interpret human behavior, skills that would later prove crucial in his career. Even as a young boy, Putin displayed fierce determination. He was small and often underestimated, but this drove him to compensate with a fearless attitude. His peers described him as a boy who never shied away from fights, even against larger opponents. This ignited his interest in martial arts, especially judo, which he embraced as a philosophy of life. But there was more to him than physical determination. Putin developed an early fascination with power and control. He watched spy films and was captivated by the ideas of manipulation and strategy. As a teenager, he already declared that his dream was to join the KGB, a highly unusual ambition for someone so young. What drew him to this world? Was it merely the promise of prestige, or something deeper? When he entered Leningrad State University, Putin studied law, but his true goal always lay beyond the classroom. He knew that the KGB was the path for those who wanted to shape the destiny of a country. During his studies, he stood out as pragmatic, calculating, and highly disciplined, traits that impressed his superiors and opened doors to his career. Joining the KGB was a turning point in his life. Putin immersed himself in a universe of secrets, conspiracies, and power plays. As an agent, he was trained to be invisible, to manipulate information, and to understand his adversary's weaknesses. His mind was shaped to think several steps ahead, like a chess player anticipating an opponent's move before it even materialized. During the Cold War, the KGB was the Soviet Union's frontline in combating Western influence. Putin was assigned to Dresden, East Germany, a post considered strategic. There, he witnessed firsthand the geopolitical tensions that divided the world. Espionage was not just a profession, it was a game of survival. But it wasn't just politics that shaped his thinking. During this time, Putin began cultivating an interest in symbolism and rituals. In Dresden, surrounded by a culture rich in esoteric traditions, he may have encountered ideas that went beyond Soviet materialism. Did he start seeking answers outside the realm of political pragmatism? With the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, Putin witnessed the beginning of the collapse of a system he had sworn to protect. The dissolution of East Germany was a blow not only to the Soviet Union but also to him personally. Yet he did not fall into despair. On the contrary, this was the moment he began to see new opportunities. When he returned to Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, Putin found a country on the brink of collapse. He knew the KGB's time was coming to an end, but his pragmatic mind had already devised a new plan. He would use everything he had learned in espionage to position himself in the political arena. What is fascinating about this stage of his life is how Putin always seemed to be in the right place at the right time. Even in a moment of chaos, his career continued to progress. Was it merely luck, or was something greater guiding his steps? The training he received as an agent not only shaped his skills but also his character. Putin learned to eliminate emotion from his decisions, calculate risks, and manipulate those around him. It was as if he were preparing for something much greater, something even he could not yet foresee. His time in the KGB was undoubtedly one of the most formative periods of his life. But what did espionage truly teach Putin? That power is won through force, or that it is, in fact, a psychological game? As the Soviet Union began to crumble, Putin was no longer just an agent. He had transformed into something more, a figure who saw chaos as an opportunity. What kind of leader would he become from this? The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 was one of the most turbulent moments of the 20th century. For millions, it marked the end of an era, the disintegration of ideals, and a descent into chaos. For Vladimir Putin, however, this period became the opportunity he had silently awaited. At that time, the future seemed uncertain for many former KGB agents. Some were cast aside by the system, while others faded into the obscure corners of history. Putin, however, possessed something that set him apart, a unique ability to read the moment and adapt. Instead of resisting change, he embraced the chaos, transforming it into a springboard for his rise. Returning to St. Petersburg, Putin found a country in disarray. The structures of the Communist Party were in ruins, and political and economic elites were scrambling for control of what remained of power. He joined the local administration, working as an advisor to Mayor Anatoly Sobchak, an influential and controversial figure. For many, this seemed like a modest new beginning. But Putin was already seeing far beyond. Within a few years, he began building a network of contacts that would allow him to influence major decisions. Businesspeople, politicians, and former KGB allies became pieces on his chessboard. Putin, with his characteristic discretion, acted as an invisible maestro, orchestrating alliances and removing obstacles almost imperceptibly. Meanwhile, the Russian people faced immense hardships. Rampant inflation, unemployment, and instability turned daily life into a battlefield. Yet Putin seemed immune to these upheavals. Not only did he survive, but he thrived in this chaotic environment. Was it merely political skill, or was something deeper at play? His entry into the political scene was marked by an uncommon ability to earn trust. He was both reserved and strategic. While other leaders sought the spotlight, Putin preferred to operate behind the scenes, consolidating his power almost invisibly. It was as if he were following a detailed plan known only to himself. But this period is also shrouded in mystery. There are reports of unusual encounters that Putin is said to have had during this time, meetings that do not appear in official records. Some claim that he began seeking guidance from enigmatic figures, individuals not connected to politics but possessing knowledge considered alternative. How much of this is true remains uncertain. The collapse of the Soviet Union also revealed a new Russia, marked by extreme inequalities and the rise of the oligarchs, tycoons who amassed immense wealth during the privatization of state enterprises. Putin, however, seemed uniquely capable of navigating this unstable terrain. He knew how to win allies and keep enemies at bay, always with a pragmatic and nearly impenetrable demeanor. It was during this period that he began earning the trust of influential figures in Moscow, including members of Boris Yeltsin's administration. His work in St. Petersburg distinguished him as an efficient and loyal administrator, qualities that, in politics, can be more valuable than any ideology. But to what extent was his loyalty genuine? Putin has always been described as someone who plays the long game. Did he already foresee his chance to ascend to ultimate power? Or was he merely going with the flow of events? Another intriguing aspect of this period is how Putin always seemed one step ahead of his adversaries. Decisions that appeared trivial ended up having enormous implications for the future. Was it mere luck, or did he possess a broader vision, perhaps even guided by something greater? In 1996, Putin was called to Moscow to work in Yeltsin's presidential administration. This move marked the beginning of his climb to central power. He left St. Petersburg behind, but carried with him all the lessons and alliances he had cultivated. While many saw this shift as simply a promotion, Putin knew it was much more. He was entering the heart of Russian power, where decisions shaping the nation's destiny were made. It was the perfect setting for someone with his ability to operate in the shadows. Yet what truly happened during these crucial years? How did an apparently ordinary man navigate the political chaos of post-Soviet Russia and emerge as an indispensable figure? By the end of the 1990s, Putin had already consolidated a unique position in the Russian government. His loyalty to Yeltsin, his discretion, and his ability to avoid scandals made him the ideal candidate for a larger role. But was this all a series of calculated events, or part of a destiny charted long before? The truth is, this period in Putin's life reveals a disquieting pattern. He not only survived political storms but used each one to climb another rung in his ascent to power. And this raises an essential question. Was he merely a fortunate man, or was he being guided by forces beyond human comprehension? By the late 1990s, Russia was in deep crisis. Boris Yeltsin's government was worn down by corruption scandals, economic instability, and a widespread sense of national decline. In this chaotic environment, Vladimir Putin emerged as a discreet yet highly efficient figure. He had gained the trust of Yeltsin and, more importantly, the inner circle of Russian power. In 1998, Putin was appointed director of the FSB, the intelligence agency that succeeded the KGB. This position placed him at the heart of the state security apparatus, granting him access to sensitive information and an invaluable network of influence. As director, he demonstrated not only competence but also a remarkable ability to navigate Moscow's political factions without creating overt enemies. The following year, Boris Yeltsin appointed Putin as prime minister. The choice surprised many, as Putin was still relatively unknown to the general public. Yet there was something about the former KGB agent that inspired confidence among Russia's oligarchs and most powerful politicians. Was it simply his loyalty, or was there something deeper that convinced them he was the right man for the moment? Within months of becoming prime minister, Putin faced his first major crisis, the Second Chechen War. This conflict, sparked by terrorist attacks attributed to Chechen separatists, became the perfect stage for Putin to project an image of strength. His ruthless decisions in handling the conflict transformed him into a leader both respected and feared, both within Russia and internationally. The war also cemented his popularity among ordinary Russians, who saw in him a strong leader capable of restoring order to a country on the brink of collapse. However, the way the war began raised many questions. Rumors swirled that the terrorist attacks may have been orchestrated to justify military intervention. How far would Putin go to consolidate his power? On December 31, 1999, Boris Yeltsin unexpectedly resigned, naming Putin as acting president. This transition was seen as a calculated move to protect Yeltsin and his family from future investigations. For Putin, however, it was the definitive turning point. He assumed leadership of the country during a moment of uncertainty, yet with an air of absolute control. In the months that followed, Putin worked to solidify his image as a leader. He won the 2000 presidential election with ease, promising stability and a return to national pride. From then on, his ascent to supreme power became irreversible. Once in charge, Putin began restructuring Russia's political system. He centralized power, weakened regional governors, and turned parliament into an extension of his will. The media, once relatively free, came under state control, ensuring that his public image was carefully crafted. But it wasn't just political reforms that marked his rise. During these years, reports began to surface of enigmatic meetings Putin allegedly had with little-known but highly influential figures. Who were these people? Were they political advisors, businessmen, or something entirely different? Consolidating his power also meant systematically eliminating opponents. Critical journalists disappeared or were murdered, magnates who dared challenge him lost their fortunes or were exiled, and independent political parties were dismantled. Putin operated with almost surgical precision, as if he knew exactly where to strike to eliminate any threat. Furthermore, there was something peculiar about how he seemed to anticipate crises and avoid political traps. Luck might explain a few victories, but so many coincidences begin to raise questions. Was his skill simply the result of impeccable training, or was there something beyond human comprehension in his strategic vision? On the international stage, Putin began repositioning Russia as a global power. He confronted the United States and NATO on multiple occasions, adopting the role of antagonist in global affairs. His actions, often bold and unpredictable, defied conventional diplomatic logic. How did he manage to maintain loyal allies despite so much controversy? Another curious aspect of his rise was the way he manipulated symbols and narratives. Putin frequently invoked Russia's glorious past, connecting his government to an almost mystical idea of national rebirth. His speeches blended pragmatism with something that seemed almost religious, a conviction that he was destined to lead Russia. Behind his public image, however, emerged stories that added a darker tone to his trajectory. Rumors of rituals, pacts, and encounters with unknown forces began to circulate among those studying his rise. These stories were dismissed as conspiracy theories by many, but what explained his almost superhuman ability to consolidate power in such a short time? By the end of his first decade in power, Putin had completely transformed Russia. He was no longer just a president. He had become an almost untouchable figure, a leader who seemed to combine charisma, intelligence, and an invisible force that made him unshakable. But the question remains, to what extent was his rise simply the result of skill and ambition? What happened behind the scenes of his journey to power? What secrets remain hidden beneath the surface of his leadership? In Vladimir Putin's trajectory, there are moments that defy conventional explanation. His meteoric rise, near-flawless decisions, and his ability to navigate crises with uncanny precision raise questions that go beyond politics. For some, these extraordinary skills might be the product of impeccable training and an exceptional mind. But what if there is another explanation? Dark accounts suggest that at some point in his career, Putin sought more than political or strategic alliances. According to these stories, he pursued a shortcut, a way to secure absolute power in a world where human rules often constrain ambition. Among the most persistent rumors is a mysterious encounter said to have taken place in the early 1990s, while Putin was still in St. Petersburg. He is alleged to have traveled to a remote region of Siberia, accompanied by a handful of trusted men. The destination was an abandoned Orthodox church deep in a dense forest. Why would he have made such a journey during such a tumultuous time in his life? Records of this trip are virtually non-existent, but the stories told by local villagers are unsettling. They speak of a group arriving in black vehicles, maintaining absolute silence. That night, many reported hearing strange chants coming from the forest, a melody that sounded both like a lament and an invocation. Inside the church, according to the rumors, a ritual took place that combined Christian symbols with practices deemed heretical. It is said that Putin participated actively, not as a mere observer, but as the central figure in a pact involving forces far beyond human comprehension. But what did he offer in exchange? Rituals of this kind, according to experts in esotericism, are rarely performed without a price. A pact of this magnitude demands sacrifices, both personal and collective. Absolute power can be granted, but at what cost? Could the global turbulence, economic crises, and armed conflicts be the price of this agreement? Beyond this tale, another story emerges from Putin's time as director of the FSB. He is said to have uncovered secret documents detailing occult practices conducted during the Tsarist period, when rulers sought to secure their reigns through supernatural forces. These documents allegedly sparked a deep interest in Putin, leading him to explore traditions blending magic, religion, and politics. But why would someone with the pragmatic training of a KGB agent take an interest in practices considered irrational? Was it mere curiosity, or did he truly believe these forces could guarantee his position? The effects of this supposed pact began to manifest shortly after his appointment as president. Putin appeared unshakable, even in the face of major crises. When confronted, he not only survived, he emerged stronger. Critics disappeared, enemies were neutralized, and allies remained inexplicably loyal. One of the most enigmatic cases involves the Second Chechen War. The way Putin used the conflict to consolidate his power was remarkable, but some claim that the war's outcome was shaped by forces beyond the military field. Could this be further evidence of an occult pact? Another curious detail is Putin's relationship with symbols of power. He frequently presents himself as a defender of Russian traditions, but some of his gestures and speeches carry nuances that evoke something beyond politics. On one occasion, during a private event, he was seen carrying an amulet that, according to experts, is used in rituals for protection and domination. What did this object represent to him? The question of sacrifice cannot be ignored either. If Putin did indeed make a pact, what was the price? Some say his personal life reflects this. He is notoriously private about his family, and his ex-wife Ludmila described life with him as extremely difficult. Are these signs of a man bearing a burden too heavy to explain? Internationally, his influence seemed disproportionate to Russia's economic power. While other leaders faced limitations, Putin advanced boldly. He defied sanctions, expanded his sphere of influence, and, despite a fragile economy, maintained Russia as a global power. How did he manage this? Pacts, however, are not eternal. Many occult traditions speak of cycles, periods during which the power granted begins to demand its final price. Are we witnessing the first signs of this? Recent crises, such as the war in Ukraine, may be evidence that the forces that once propelled him are now exacting their payment. The idea that a world leader might have made a pact with forces beyond human understanding may seem absurd. But when we critically examine the events, the coincidences start to seem less random. Putin is undoubtedly a brilliant strategist. But is that enough to explain everything? Since taking power, Vladimir Putin has become a central figure on the global stage, yet his reign is accompanied by events that raise questions about the forces sustaining him. What makes a leader so resilient, even in the face of crises that would topple others? Is it mere political strategy, or does something transcend logic? One of the most intriguing aspects of his leadership is the near-unbreakable loyalty of his allies. Over more than 2 decades in power, Putin has maintained a tight circle of collaborators who, despite international sanctions and external pressures, remain firmly by his side. This loyalty is a rarity in politics, particularly in a volatile system like Russia's. Is it charisma, fear, or a deeper, intangible bond? Russian state media, almost entirely controlled by the Kremlin, often portrays Putin as a near-mythical figure. He is shown wrestling bears, fishing in remote landscapes, and demonstrating unmatched physical and mental strength. These carefully choreographed events may seem like propaganda, but they also evoke ancient archetypes of leaders protected by divine or mystical forces. Unexplained phenomena have also arisen at key moments in his leadership. In 2003, for instance, the Kursk submarine disaster, which claimed the lives of 118 sailors, was a critical test for Putin. Many predicted the tragedy would irreparably damage his reputation. Yet he not only survived the scandal but emerged stronger, solidifying his image as an unshakable leader. How did he manage to turn the tide in what seemed like an impossible situation? A more curious episode occurred in 2014 during the annexation of Crimea. While the West reacted with sanctions and condemnation, Putin maintained an almost eerie calm. Behind the scenes, reports suggest he seemed strangely confident, as if he already knew the outcome before events unfolded. Was this the product of strategic foresight, or was something more guiding him? Another noteworthy point is the frequent failure of opposition attempts against him. Opposition leaders like Boris Nemtsov, Alexei Navalny, and others have faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles, including imprisonment, persecution, or mysterious deaths. Many attribute this to the Kremlin's security apparatus. But could there be something beyond this? Something protecting Putin and weakening his opponents in ways that defy logical explanation? His longevity in power is also a puzzling phenomenon. In a world where leaders face cycles of popularity and downfall, Putin remains steadfast. He has not only survived multiple domestic and international crises but emerged from them in an even stronger position. Economic crises, such as the sanctions imposed after 2014, which would devastate other countries, seem to impact Russia less severely. Why? Recent reports speak of enigmatic meetings Putin has had with religious leaders and spiritual figures both in Russia and abroad. In one widely discussed instance, he is said to have met with monks from Mount Athos in Greece, known for their mystical practices. Although he officially champions the Orthodox Church, there are indications that Putin seeks something more in his spiritual connections. His stance toward the West also reinforces the idea that he operates on a plane beyond conventional politics. He often refers to a multipolar world and rejects Western values as corrosive. Behind this geopolitical narrative lies something deeper: the sense that Putin sees his role as destined, almost predestined, to resist forces he perceives as existential threats to Russia. The inexplicable phenomena surrounding his leadership are not limited to domestic or international politics. There are also smaller but equally unsettling events. For instance, Putin has survived multiple assassination attempts, many of which were uncovered before they could be carried out. Can luck alone explain this, or is there an invisible protection at work? There are also moments when Putin seems to vanish for short but significant periods. In 2015, for example, he disappeared from public view for 10 days, sparking speculation. While the Kremlin offered mundane explanations, rumors persist that he was engaged in something far greater, perhaps a renewal of his alliance with the forces sustaining him. His global influence also exhibits unusual characteristics. Despite Russia's economy being smaller than other major powers, Putin continues to shape world affairs, whether in Syria, Ukraine, or in relations with China. How does he maintain this outsized relevance? The invasions of Ukraine and his stance toward the West suggest that Putin operates under a logic beyond mere geopolitical interests. He often speaks of preserving the Russian soul and fighting against a greater evil. For many, these statements are just rhetoric, but for others, they indicate a conflict far deeper than it appears. Ultimately, the signs that Putin might be involved in something supernatural are abundant but subtle. They appear in historical events, in seemingly impossible decisions, and even in the smallest details of his leadership. If there is a pact or a force guiding Putin, the question remains: how long can it last before the final price is demanded? If Vladimir Putin truly sealed a pact to secure his absolute power, the consequences of such an act may go far beyond his personal leadership. Pacts of this nature, according to esoteric traditions, involve more than the mere exchange of favors. They unleash forces that affect not only the individual but also the world around them. What can Putin's story teach us about the costs of an alliance with the unknown? The first evidence that the consequences of this pact manifest globally is the growing instability defining the modern world. From localized wars to global economic crises, it seems that escalating tensions have reached unprecedented levels since the early 21st century. Under Putin's leadership, Russia has played a central role in many of these events, from the conflict in Syria to the invasion of Ukraine. Could these actions be part of a hidden price to be paid, where chaos serves a greater purpose? Another clear reflection is the rise in political and social polarization across the globe. It is almost as if the forces that once secured Putin's power are now spreading, generating divisions and fueling instability. Countries once united are now facing internal fractures, as if the global balance is being slowly eroded. On a personal level, the consequences also seem apparent. Despite his controlled public image, Putin leads an extremely isolated private life. He is rarely seen with his family, and rumors suggest that his personal relationships are marked by distance and sacrifice. Is this merely a strategic choice or a reflection of a greater burden he carries? In Russia, the cost of this power is also evident. The nation faces constant economic challenges, severe sanctions, and international isolation. Many citizens live in precarious conditions while the government prioritizes military and geopolitical efforts. Are these hardships the price to be paid for a leadership sustained by hidden forces? Historically, similar pacts are often associated with cycles, periods of great prosperity or power followed by inevitable collapse. Could Russia be approaching a critical juncture where the price of this pact will finally be paid in full? The impact on global politics is also noteworthy. Under Putin's leadership, Russia has interfered in foreign elections, engaged in proxy conflicts, and challenged the Western-led world order. Yet this boldness also carries increasing risks. How much longer can Putin continue defying global powers before his actions trigger catastrophic consequences? Another intriguing point is the symbolic nature of Putin's actions. He frequently invokes the idea that he is fighting for something greater, for the soul of Russia or the survival of a multipolar world. But what is truly at stake in this battle? Could Putin be fighting to preserve the control granted by his pact while facing forces that inevitably seek to collect what was promised? If the consequences of this pact truly exist, they are not limited to the present. Many esoteric traditions suggest that such agreements transcend the life of the one who makes them, affecting future generations. Are we witnessing the beginning of a cycle that could redefine the global balance of power for centuries to come? A disturbing question is the extent to which the forces sustaining Putin might influence other leaders and events. If he is indeed involved in something supernatural, could these forces be spreading beyond Russia, affecting other nations and global leaders? In the end, the consequences of such a pact may not be immediate but cumulative. The world appears to be heading toward a breaking point, a moment when the forces at play will finally reveal themselves in full magnitude. In this scenario, Putin's figure is only the beginning of something far greater, something that even he may not be able to control. But one unsettling question remains. If the forces sustaining Putin demand a price, who will be destined to pay it, him, Russia, or the entire world. Vladimir Putin's trajectory is an enigma, blending political skill, ruthless strategy, and a touch of mystery that defies conventional explanations. His rise to power and his hold of the top raise questions that transcend politics, touching on invisible forces that may be shaping the course of history. If there is a pact or a connection to the supernatural guiding his actions, the consequences of this agreement have not yet fully unfolded. It remains to be seen whether these forces will continue to sustain his leadership, or if the final price will be exacted in a way that transforms the world as we know it. If you're interested in exploring more about spirituality, I've specially selected for you some videos filled with profound knowledge and fascinating discoveries that you'll love. Just click on one of them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual learning. Your commitment to knowledge is the first step toward transforming your reality.